Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today on our wonderful webinar with these wonderful people on mental health, a very important discussion today. I'm so happy that you're joining us, and if you would like to say hello, there's a chat box on the right. Just let us know where you're calling in from and ask any questions throughout the discussion today about anything you want of these wonderful people. Before I introduce Janine and Ace to you guys, I just like to talk a little bit about the fact that this is part of the We Make Events UK online speakeasy, and these guys are doing some wonderful things across from November through to January 8th in terms of skill sessions and fireside chats and online discussions. So if you'd like to know what they're doing, please head over to wemakeevents.com, and there's the password there, so take a screenshot if you'd like to, and if you want to see more of what the We Make Events team are doing. Also, just because this is such an important discussion, TheatreArtLife, we have built a collection of mental health and wellbeing resources on our website. It's under theatreartlife.com/evolution. And if you go to the mental health and wellbeing tab, you'll see some resources available to you if you should need some support or help during this period of time. Globally, we're dealing with a lot in entertainment through COVID and also through this Christmas period with various lockdowns. So if you're in need of support, please don't hesitate to reach out and find the right support for you. Also, if you are interested, a good friend of mine, Barbara Delpez, who has a wonderful coach, is offering some free 60-minute sessions from those suffering from anxiety and stress, anger, frustration, whatever's going on with you. If you'd like to have one of those free 60-minute sessions, you can send me an email, anna@theatreartlife.com, and I will send you the link to register, and hopefully you'll be in the limited number of free 60-minute sessions that she's offering throughout the Christmas period, and it's free, so you don't have to reach out and pay for anything there. So if you're interested, take a screenshot, email me, go check out those resources. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Ace and Janine. So Ace is a certified addictions worker who's been involved in the music industry since 1996. Ace knows the ins and outs of the road and the associated pressures and struggles. He's been there as a musician, tour manager, stage manager, sound engineer, production manager, and is now an addictions recovery coach. He's also the founding partner of Over the Bridge. His goals are to help break the stigmas associated with addiction and mental illness through education, awareness, and support, and to provide resources to musicians, crew, and entertainment professionals. So thanks, Ace. Nice to meet you again.
Nice to meet you again as well, and thanks for reading that whole thing off. Much appreciated.
No, it's important to give the background, you see. And Janine Diaz is a wellness advocate, teacher, and certified health coach. She's the creator and host of the Tour Life podcast and the Thriving podcast, where she speaks with music industry professionals about living happier and healthier lives on and off the road. Through her podcasts and private practice, she strives to amplify the often unheard voices of the music industry and to bring awareness to the importance of prioritising mental, physical, and emotional health. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, Ace.
Hey, how you doing again?
And the good thing is these two know each other, so it's going to be an easy conversation.
Yeah.
So before we get started with some of the topics of conversation about mental health, COVID, and where we're at, state of play, I'd like to just, if you guys could give a little background for those who don't know you about how you got into this line of work in the entertainment industry in terms of your mental health support. So maybe we'll start with you, Ace.
Yeah. So I started off playing drums when I was at the age of 9. Played for until I was 29, so about 20 years there. During that time, I was a touring musician. I booked all our shows. I booked the vans. I was the tour manager without even knowing that was a job. I was the band babysitter, cat wrangler, whatever you want to call it. As people wanted to get real jobs. I wasn't ready. So I found that there was a thing called a tour manager, which was basically what I was doing minus playing drums and having that sort of responsibility. And then I became a sound engineer so I can get more gigs. Throughout that time, I was touring with a lot of artists. And when you're a tour manager, you really get a lot of late night hours driving in a van and talking about, where people are in life, the mental stresses, missing home, or when you talk about how they feel like they're home on the road, and when they're at home, they feel, not quite right. And you get a lot of these really in-depth conversations. However, so with that and personal experiences of my mom suffering through mental illness and, being by her side during electric shock treatment it makes anybody an advocate, I'll tell you that. But with the addictions recovery thing, that happened because I was out with an artist who was in recovery, and then he relapsed while we were on tour, and I thought I could have helped better. So I went back to school, became an addictions counselor, worked at a bunch of different programs in my home city of Hamilton, Ontario. And then once I got those real life experiences, I brought it back out onto the road to work with artists. And while I was doing that, I really recognized the power of peer support. And I started up a peer support group on Facebook, which soon became a nonprofit. Me having a background in music, I had no experience running a nonprofit. So, people are like, "Oh, you run a nonprofit? How do you do it?" I'm like, I have no idea. So made a lot of mistakes, asked a lot of questions, Googled a whole bunch of stuff, and talked to everybody I could. And that was 3 and a bit years ago. And now Over the Bridge is offering peer support groups on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, as well as, we do harm reduction training. And we, as 2021 comes upon us, our focus is on program development for touring musicians and crew.
So not such a side job now. It's probably a full-time thing for you right now, is it?
Full-time every day, except for this past weekend, but hey.
Fantastic. And Janine, tell us your story.
Oh man, so my story, it's really very personal, the way that I got into the music industry, but I started in public radio. So I originally worked for WBEZ, which is Chicago's NPR station, and I did sales, and then I got into marketing. It turned out most of my accounts were in the music industry. They were like all the music venues, because I could have worked with the attorneys or the universities or, whoever, but I preferred to work with all of the music venues. So I started going to a lot of shows, and I learned stuff, learned how that side of the industry went from that end. And we also had some podcasts, which was really cool. So that's how I learned about the podcast initially. But basically, after WBZ, I ended up leaving because I got into a really long relationship with somebody who toured. And we actually met at the station, and I went and I tagged along on a few legs on the West Coast, and we did South by, and we did all this other stuff. I dabbled a little bit in tour managing with a friend's band. But then I ended up deciding to be a health coach. And the reason that I decided to be a health coach was because throughout this long relationship, I kind of lost who I was. I wasn't sure where I was going. I decided to be a high school teacher because that's what my degree was in. And so that, that's kind of where I ended up. But then I realized that after this relationship where I was on the opposite side. So Ace was, he was the person who was on tour, and he saw all of that for the most part. I was actually the other person who was home when my partner would return from tour. And we went through a lot. We had a lot of issues. Some of them were definitely just between us, but there was a lot of it that definitely was affected by the way that he had to balance this life outside of being home. And I didn't quite understand where our conflict came from. And when I started focusing in more on working on myself, I started to realize the part that I played in the relationship and I wanted to know how I could help people who were in that space. And so, through becoming a health coach, I decided, well, I want to help people who work on tour because that's what I know. I know that that there's a need. And so I wanted to figure out what that need was exactly. So that's when I started my podcast. So the Tour Life podcast, I started interviewing friends that I had in the industry. And then it kind of just snowballed into some amazing people. And most recently, I met Ace through TM 101 because we did a health and wellness webinar there. But it's really been amazing because people have been trusting me with their stories. So if anything, I'm really just here to share, to allow people to share their stories and to make a safe space so that they understand that it's okay to feel it the way that they feel. And for people outside of the industry to understand what it's like for people who tour, because it's a completely different world from most people's normal 9 to 5s.
Mm. And I think, it's interesting that you say that it's so different, Janine, because I feel like if people just called up particularly general mental health support, they may or may not understand the context in which people live and exist. But you guys have both, from either end of the spectrum, been there and experienced that. If you could articulate what that differences is from normal life, like what would be the sort of checklist of things that you would say to somebody in a generic industry, why entertainment lifestyle is particularly stressful and it can have effects on your mental health?
Well, I would say that, I would say that you're essentially living two different lives. And where the conflict comes in is when you're marrying those two lives together when you come off tour. And so that's usually where things get a little dicey, because when you're on tour, you're going and you have a schedule and you know what you're doing, and that's where you're at your best. And then when you get home, it was kind of like you were in a time warp. Everything had stopped for you at home, but everything was kept going for everybody else. And so then there's some disconnect that happens there. Ace, can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, so one of the things that projects that I started even before Over the Bridge was a thing was research with McMaster University, which is a large research university here in Hamilton. But that looks towards it's called post-performance mood response. So, or post-performance tour response, and that can go for crew or musicians or anybody on the road. And what it is when you're on the road and it's constant adrenaline, your serotonin and dopamine levels go through the roof. And it's sort of like take the best day of your life, whether it's getting married or the birth of a child, but that like not stopping for like, a month, 2 months, 3 months. And then when you get home, you still got this energy and you're sort of on like just go mode all the time. So when you come down, it takes a while for those dopamine and serotonin levels to dip down and sort of become normalized again. So for the first couple of days, you're still riding high. And as Janine mentioned, there's a lot of conflict because there's a lot of things on the road that don't happen, that happen at home. Like simple things like cleaning up after yourself, making your own food, doing your laundry. Laundry is something that you do once every couple of weeks and you wear dirty clothes the rest of the time. You know what I mean? So it's these simple responsibilities that get neglected on the road. And now you're supposed to, as Janine mentions, like you come home, the life continues on, and you're supposed to just jump right into the same pace as everybody else is going. But in reality, you've been going 10 times as fast for constantly. Your balance is out of whack, your life-home balance, because you're 100% at work or you're 100% at home. There's no, I'm home at 5 o'clock now, right? And where you have those times, in the evening to settle down. Well, in the evening time, you're gangbusters. It's showtime. It's time to go. And then once the show is over and you've loaded back up, if you're in a van and trailer or just a van tour, there's a good chance you're driving 5 or 6 hours after that show. You know, like it's just never over. So, but the post-performance mood response is, you know, it's that high. So how do you manage it? What's your post-tour aftercare, right? And, you know, I know some people who come home to families and they need 2 or 3 days. It's almost like the wife takes the kids to a hotel for a couple of days just so the husband can get acclimated to what home life is. I've come home. Like, I remember one time I came home from tour. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I caught the last flight home or whatever. I've been out for 8 weeks. I woke up, and in every hotel room, your bed's in the middle of the room. My bed is up against my wall. So when I woke up, the wall was right there. I didn't recognize my own house for 20 minutes.
Wow.
Just because, like, I was like, what? And I remember that freaking me out, being like, how do I not recognize my own bedroom? I remember going like, all this stuff looks familiar. I've been here. I've definitely been here before, but for a legit 15, 20 minutes to get your head wrapped around that you're actually home and it's not a dream, that it sort of screws with you for a second.
That reminded me. So I noticed that my partner used to do this. That he would always insist on like sleeping on the sofa, and it never really made sense to me. But right now, I'm like, oh, maybe that was more like a bunk.
Yeah.
He was not ready to get back into a normal bed yet. It was like, I'll just sleep on the couch for a bit.
But you know,
I used to do the same. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and those things are definitely, you know, we laugh about them in retrospect because they start to make sense to us. But when you're in it, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to the people at home. And then the communication part, when you're trying to just shut your mind off, isn't something you really want to be doing, you know? So Ace, you know, the couples that, you know, that have been married and have been able to sustain good relationships, I think it's because at some point they figured that out, right? They figured out that it was probably a good idea to give that space and that things would be able to come around and be better once that space was provided. And getting to that point, especially when it's a new relationship or when you haven't really, you're still working on a relationship, but it's really a long distance relationship most of the time, that whole piece is very difficult, especially when you don't have anyone to talk to. I mean, I remember Googling, you know, just keywords about like how to deal with, you know, boyfriend who is on tour and not finding anything, or like finding maybe, you know, like an really old blog that like sort of gives like, you know, like a little diary sort of thing or whatever, but there weren't really that many resources. And this was, you know, this was years ago. And so it's that feeling of being alone and not understanding and kind of trying to figure out like, okay, well, what kind of relationship is this? Is this a relationship like one that a military couple would have? Is this a relationship like, you know, I even looked up basketball couples, like people who play sports overseas. I'm like, maybe that's something similar, you know, but yeah, it's, you know, those are very real things. You know, it's a chemical thing that's happening, like Ace said, and they're finding through the research that there is a connection and this is what happens. And so I think it's really, you know, people like me who are coaches, or people like Ace and like you, Anna, who are researching these things and who are having these conversations. It's important to understand that that's the way that you help people, really, by talking about it and putting it out on the table.
And before we get into the COVID thing, because I think, you know, what's quite interesting is, you know, if you want to say where we're at now, you sort of have to understand the industry and the relationships that you're living in prior to, say, the COVID period. One thing that interested me when we first chatted, Janine, was your discussion on the fact that, and maybe Ace, you can identify with this as well, just the lack of stability in the work and support, you know, on the road from a management point of view. And it's just, you know, when they say it's kind of a rock and roll lifestyle, it is literally a rock and roll lifestyle. You're not necessarily getting a regular income or, you know, regular holiday breaks, or, you know, it's quite unstable. Do you think that contributes, and if so, how much, to the mental health of people who live that lifestyle?
So as far as the instability goes, I think that's one thing that I just remember whenever I have these conversations, there's always an element of fear and not really knowing what's next. And at the point where you start to trust that your career is in a good place and there's always going to be a gig and you don't really have to worry about it, it happens over time. But at the end of the day, it's still the nature of the job, right? To take a gig and then not really know when the next tour is going to be. It's almost like you're always kind of just waiting on other people, and there's only so much that is under your control. And so that does cause a sense of instability, which I think can be difficult for anybody to deal with. But then, you add on all of these other elements, it ends up being really complicated. And Ace, I'm really curious about how that sense of stability has shown up in your work.
Well, big time. Well, first to say it takes about 7 or 8 years for any business to become to become solid and to be able to count on it. So as a roadie, it takes about 6, 7, 8 years for people to get that regular income up and going, right? And yes, we do get used to the lack of balance. You know what I mean? And financial security. Weirdly enough, you do get used to it. But now with COVID, it definitely adds in another different level of stress and anxiety. Just because obviously now it doesn't matter. It's not even about how good I am at my job or what connections. It's obviously about the situation. So with working in music, it does bring a sense of pride. It brings you a sense of confidence because music is amazing and it makes us feel wonderful things. So when we have the ability to help bring thousands of people together to create a moment, sometimes for some of those people, it's the best experience of their life. Maybe it's their first concert. We get that. That's an excitement that really excites me. Talking to people, it's like, this is my first concert in 5 years. Right. And then those conversations really make me appreciate that I get to see this almost every night. But now we don't get to do that for other people. And that really bums me out. But the instability of finance, it's not just music industry, it's everybody right now, any business person. It just happens that the music industry is full of independent contractors, right? So that's why I think it's the music industry is definitely taking it harder than a lot of the other industries, just because the amount of independent contractors there are, as opposed to someone working at a restaurant. It's not the employees are going to feel it, but the business owners are going to be feeling it more, right? And the business owners are almost like a buffer in between the employees, hopefully in most cases. But when you got millions of people in the music industry, and everyone's their own little boss, there's no buffer. And I think that's definitely taken a toll on people.
So I was just going to say, and it's not necessarily, I think this is the time where I feel that entertainment as a general banner we're all in that same together, because, in events, they're contractors, in music industry, it's contractors, and even in certain theatrical realms or freelance, I've been working freelance for a few years as well. So it's that it's the time that we're actually all in that same boat, in terms of entertainment. What were you going to say, Janine?
Well, yeah, I mean, and with COVID, it does because, the nature of the job is to be resilient to, these fluctuations and your finances. You have to learn how to balance everything out. And that's something you do as you progress in your career. You have to learn how to deal with this sort of daily instability that you get, but then you're able to have some sort of structure by simply being on tour, right? But when now you guys are dealing with a situation where you're at home, you still have that instability, but it's so much bigger because, like you said, Ace, it's not just about what you're doing. It's what everyone is doing. And that causes all sorts of anxiety, right? I mean, how many conversations have we had about just concerned about why people don't wear masks? Like, if you guys just wore masks, we would have a better sense of, hope for the future, because it would hopefully come faster. And so those are the sorts of things that definitely take a toll on people. But even when you're on tour, I mean, and when you come home, just having that, and this is what we were talking about, Anna, also, is that because there isn't like a corporate structure and there isn't really a place to kind of, to kind of take reference from, so that kind of how things are supposed to go and stuff like that, those are in and of itself elements that will cause a sense of instability. And and that's something that, I would love to get a little bit of more insight on, especially from Ace, because it's like, you mentioned that the financial aspect of it and how you kind of have to deal with that. Do you see a parallel in the way that we're all having to deal with this COVID reason that we have this financial instability, and just the way that when you come up in the industry? Because remember, some people have just gotten started, and they're just dealing with these issues. And have you seen, like, how has that changed and developed over time, and how have you been able to deal with it better? And has that helped with dealing with COVID?
Well, like when you ask, like, how do I deal with it? How I deal with it, that's a very personal question. Everyone's going to have their own answer. For me, one thing that COVID has brought to me is that I've been able to have a sense of schedule. Which is something I've never had before. My schedule was very up and down. Some days I have 6 a.m. start times, 4 a.m. start times. Sometimes it's not until 3 in the afternoon. Right now, for me right now, finding the balance that I was lacking before has really helped. So I wake up at 6 o'clock. I do my yoga at 7 to 8. I eat my breakfast by 9, unless I'm intermittent fasting, then I don't eat until 12. Sorry, Janine and I just did an intermittent fasting challenge together with a bunch of group members from the Over the Bridge peer support groups. So anyways, I'm picking that back up in January, Janine, but hey, it's holiday.
A lifestyle.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle. But how other people have been handling, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. I talk to about 20 people a week outside the peer support groups, and we talk about this a lot. And people are struggling, man. People, for one reason or another, they're unable to find that structure. When you're on the road, as Janine mentioned, your daily schedule is already sought out for you. Someone, aka tour manager Ace, goes, here's your schedule for the day. Gives you a piece of paper or looks in your master tour app, and your schedule's there. You don't have to worry about how you're getting there. You don't have to worry about, I tell you everything, and you just kind of get to go through the motions until you get to the show, and your schedule's there. Now that people from the industry are home, or at least for the tour managers, crew people, you got to make your own schedule up, and you got to be accountable for yourself. It's easier to be accountable to other people than it is to yourself. And now everyone has to look at themselves and be like, oh, I got to be accountable for myself. Nah, it's all right. I'm not used to it. And they go back to bed.
Would you say that's one of the reasons that you love being on that people love being on tour? That they don't have to make up their own structure?
Yeah, the structure's already there. Even me, I'll make up my own. I get to schedule everything how everything fits, but I do that weeks in advance. I could tell you what's going on in a show in North Carolina. 3 weeks, I could tell you exactly what I'm doing minute to minute. So I just end up going through those motions as well. So I set my own schedule, but it's like I don't even schedule it because I've done it so far in advance that I just have to look through my notes, like, oh yeah, okay, I got to go pay. Okay, it's settlement time. Oh, time to check out merch time. It tells me everything that I need to do. So yeah.
So is that what obviously both of you have had probably a lot of discussions in 2020 with people who are going through these situations, and before we talk about the industry coming back into COVID and how we should move forward, what tips are you sort of, is it Ace, are you saying like put a structure to your day and set some simple goals? Like what are you telling people? And also, I mean, we have to acknowledge as well that there's a lot of people in certain financial situations and in different levels of COVID stress because of how each country is handling the situation. And I feel like you have a little bit of COVID envy when you see other people or other countries kicking back and going out to barbecues when you're like stage 3, tier 4, second, fourth round, fourth wave of COVID. So like, can you give us a little bit of, advice or tips on whoever's dealing or whoever's listening at the moment, what could they do?
Find yourself an accountability buddy, whether it's your partner at home, wife, husband, kid, friend, parent. Finding yourself an accountability partner, I think is should be top of the list. So that way, if you, just decide to slide something off, you got your buddy being like, hey, we should do this. You know what I mean? And if both people are saying, nah, we shouldn't do that, then you both know you're in the wrong and get to doing whatever you need to be doing. So, but accountability is hard. But get yourself an accountability partner. I think would be first and foremost. Join a group. There's Zoom groups. There's webinars. There's things like this. So whoever's watching, thank you. You've done a great job on taking personal accountability for your now and for your future. So thank you very much for everyone who's tuned in to watch us talk for a bit. So yeah, put things on your schedule.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think one of the really important things for all of us is to recognize and accept that things are difficult. To not try to be the strongest person and to not try to be, the toughest and try to pretend that things aren't happening. I've cried it out a few times, especially early on in the pandemic, just randomly, not even really sure why, because I was like, I think I'm fine. But you have to allow yourself to feel it and to, that envy that you may feel when other people are doing things, or the anger that you're feeling whenever you see people doing things that you think are counterproductive. Those feelings are valid. And it's okay to feel them. And those feelings will help you make better decisions moving forward. So I think it's really important, number one, to recognize those feelings and to sit with them. And then the other thing is to find a way to be accountable to yourself, like Ace said. And in order to find an accountability buddy, you have to reach out to people. So it's really important to just try to communicate with somebody. I know for some people that I'm friends with, it has always been really hard to communicate. I mean, it's something that they had to work at, and now you have to work at it that much harder, because you have to reach out to people through the internet. You have to give them a call. Don't just text someone. If it's a friend, if it's somebody that you are used to seeing in person, FaceTime them, so that you can actually see their face. It's really important to actually see people's faces. So I think, definitely recognize your feelings, sit with them and accept them, and validate them, and then actually communicate with people so that you can, find somebody to help you through it. It's really important. You can't do this alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Petra asks what was the state of you coming back down after tour? Ace, what was it called?
The term is called post. Yeah, I was just about to put that in. The term is called post-performance depression. Although, for the sake of our research, putting depression at the end of post-performance is a leading phrase. So if anybody who was going in to do the research, they'd be like, oh, so they're after depression responses, which wasn't the case. So we had to change it to post-performance mood response. But we were able to get over 400 musicians to participate, and I have a team analyzing the data as we speak, and hopefully the findings will be out shortly in the new year. So once we've been able to come to our conclusions, we could potentially write the definition for post-performance depression depending on our findings. So we'll see.
Which is a term we've heard all the time, right? We just call it post-tour depression. Like,
yeah,
it is. It's when you crash, when you come home from tour. But you're validating that, and this is what's really important too, validating these anecdotal situations and seeing that it's a scientific thing. You can prove it with science through research, and that way you can find a way to do something about it, which I think is really important.
Do you guys think that, I think with particularly this year and the industry in events, and I see Robert says about performing artists as well in New York City and I guess around the globe, is this highlighted that there's not enough mental health support in our realm, or have you guys been busy? Is this a peak time for you guys, and do you think that we need to be better when we come back from COVID at providing support for people in the industry from a mental health perspective?
Well, I think music industry and performance support has definitely lacked in the past. But like, I'm talking about specific support, because a lot of musicians I talk to, they go out there, talk to therapists on that, which is very helpful, don't get me wrong, but there's definitely, depending on the therapist you get, sometimes there's a disconnect between their understandings of the music culture, right? So that's one of the large gaps that Over the Bridge has found. And as like I mentioned earlier, moving into 2021, filling in those gaps for music industry specific people is our primary focus. So
yeah, I think as far as mental health, there are resources that have been around, but as Ace points out, as far as finding pointed help for people in the industry where you're talking to somebody who actually understands where you're coming from, there are gaps. However, there are great organizations that are doing the work. And something that I really want to stress, it's not about starting something new necessarily all the time. You don't always have to start a new organization. It's important to find what's already out there and leverage it so that you can collaborate and create something that works. Because it's really easy to just, start your own thing and start a nonprofit and then, start from scratch, but then you're reinventing the wheel, right? Why not build on top of the things that organizations are already doing? So, we've had examples where, people will reach out to me and they'll say, well, I'm thinking about starting a support group. Well, I happen to know that Over the Bridge already does an amazing job at support groups, and they have them weekly. And, so maybe you guys can work together in order to make something even bigger, right? We have Roadie Clinic, which has started working with pretty much every organization that we've talked to, including Tour Management 101 and Over the Bridge. And Roadie Clinic wants to have advocates on the road for every tour that advocate for mental health and for physical wellness and emotional wellness on tour. So these things exist. If you go to showmakers.com, that's another place where it's just a list of resources. TheatreArtLife, you put together a list of resources. So the resources are there. It's about reaching out to people and then building upon what's already been laid out.
And do you think that, in terms of, I'm fascinated about in the music industry about getting health and wellbeing people into the tours, because I think that's an amazing aspect, and I think that should definitely be a focus of many entertainment industries to bring that into our workplace. And I used to work in circus, so we have coaches for physical health and physical ability. Why would you not have the same thing for mental health? There's not a huge difference there for me, especially when people are on tour or they're moving countries and living and working in environments that they're not used to. Do you think then that there should be some responsibility on, say, depending on what the titles are in the music industry, but, you know, tour managers, company managers, producers, technical directors, to be advocates for this coming back out of COVID? And do you think there'll be a larger insistence on this now that we've had to suffer through 2020 and 2021?
Yes. Short answer, yes. I think it's important for everyone who, and this is a conversation I had with some amazing people who, one was an agent, one was a tour manager, there was another one who was on the promoter end, and and we all agreed it's really important for all of us who get it, right, who understand the importance of mental health and your emotional well-being on tour. It's important for us to work together because we get it. But what's really, really, really important too is to figure out a way to get the people who don't care on board as well. And a lot of these people who I would say don't care, they can come from anywhere in the industry. Some people have had horrible tour managers that have been awful to everybody, or production managers that are just really, really, they just want to get it done and they don't really care about the person, right? But there are plenty of people who do care about the person. And I think as far as getting the message out, it's really just about advocating for it, communicating to the people that you work with that it's something that you care about. And I do think it's a personal responsibility that we all have. But in addition to that, there needs to be a responsibility from the people who are putting together the budgets to actually work it into the budget. Because somebody who's handling the production of, a multi-bus tour does not necessarily have the time to constantly be worrying about people's mental health. A tour manager who is dealing with, A, B, and C crew doesn't have the mental capacity and the bandwidth to deal with, the HR issues on the tour, right? And this is something that has happened, and that's why those things fall through the cracks, because they're things that you can compartmentalize and you can push to another day, but then they never really get taken care of. So it's important to have somebody on tour who is able to handle that. And in order to do that, bottom line, you have to get the people who are in charge of the budgets to care.
Would you agree, Ace?
Yeah, there's not much I can add there, and, but on this, you need the right people in place, because if you expect a tour manager or production manager to take on the responsibility, it's not fair to them, because doing what we are proposing here takes a different skill set. A guy who's sitting there loading trucks and making sure the stage goes up and down, it's not his, where in his skill set does it say he has to be a mental health advocate and coach as well? On top of that, that's not what they've been training for the last, some of these guys been on it for 30, 40 years, and even for the new guys, then you got a young tour manager who's 18, 19, who happened to get that gig because his buddy is in a band and they just finally got their own van, and now they're going across state lines, and it's this kid's responsibility to be everybody's mental health savior. It's just the realistic, the reality of the situation. You got to be careful on who you put into those positions as well. So it comes down to budget, right? But when you're looking at artists who are on the bottom working their way up, you got to put that money where it most makes sense. Sure, can Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, all those large artists afford it? Sure, no problem. Have a therapist, have a counselor, have a whole team. I'm pretty sure they can afford it. I've never seen their budgets, but I'm pretty sure they could. As opposed to that band who just got signed to a 360 deal, who's in a minivan with a trailer, and the van is 15 years old, and they bought off their brother's buddy. If they have any extra money outside of feeding themselves, what are they going to put it towards? Maybe a guy who's help them load the gear. A buddy will sell merch. A buddy do that.
Yeah.
And it's not
who's
that
willing
guy's
to do it, right?
Who's willing to do it? So,
and it's something that Roadie Clinic is doing an amazing job, and this is part of their plan, is to make it so that we have access to the information in order to, like, if you care about this. So, because at the end of the day, I feel like it really is a culture issue. And if you care about the well-being of the humans on your team, you don't necessarily have to put forth all of your effort into just, making sure that everything's good as far as mental health goes and wellness. But you can make decisions that are based on taking care of the humans in the group that you're dealing with. So it very much is a culture thing. And that's why it's very important for the tour managers who are veterans to, when they bring on new people, to instill this culture of caring, this culture of wellness, this culture of taking care of each other. Because as much as we like to say that the music industry is a pirate ship, it's no longer just a pirate ship. Now we are connected. We're able to have these conversations. Something that I try to get across to people outside of the industry is that it may seem like it's just this glamorous party atmosphere and everything's good and everyone's just having fun. It's very much a business. That's what it is. And in order to take care of the business, you have to take care of the people within the business, and you have to promote a culture of well-being within that business.
Absolutely. No, I think, creating that culture in whatever area of entertainment is really important. I think that we've put the responsibility on the producers and the people who are making the budgets and all of that sort of stuff. What do you think? What about the crew and the individuals? Coming back in, they're not going to be necessarily in a position to make those decisions or enforce it. And I can imagine maybe that if there's a whole team of people that are not caring, and you're this one person putting your hand up and saying, I'd like us to talk about mental health, that may or may not come across very well. What if somebody's feeling quite powerless about that? What would you suggest that they do?
You know what? So, sorry, like Janine mentioned, there's a whole lot of organizations, and because I'm here and they're not, I'm going to say join our Over the Bridge peer support group on Facebook. It's an avenue to ask questions, to to share some information. We're always encouraging members to because like there's so much information in the world, so our group, I like to really encourage people to say, if you find something that you think will be useful, post it, because the music industry is a unique culture, and within our culture there's subcultures based on the genre of music that you're playing. A guy in the country world is going to take in information differently than someone from the underground hip hop world, as opposed to someone in the death metal scene from Europe. How we intake information is going to be different in how it connects with us. So we want everybody to bring the resources to let us know what's on your mind, and so other people can help you, and so you can help other people. It's a great peer support group, and we have over 1,200 members from all over the globe, and so if you want to be an advocate and you don't know how to start, here's a great place to ask. So, and
is that okay if they're like not necessarily in the music industry and they're more doing events and stuff like, because there's very similar, there's a lot of parallels. Are you okay if somebody from the events groups come in and say, hey, can we get some advice?
Yeah, for sure. We Over the Bridge started as a music industry focused organization because that's where I came from. But as we grow, if you're in entertainment and events, come on in. We're here for you. If you want to advocate in your culture, the culture that you've created, we're here for you.
Well, and Anna brings up a good point, though. What if you're that person? What if you're the only person who cares in the group? How do you have that conversation? Well, I think it starts with you, right? So I know as a coach, I know from my personal experience that the answers to change and the answers to improving somebody's lifestyle doesn't come from me telling them what to do. It comes from me modeling something that I think is positive, that makes me feel good, and then hopefully spreading that goodness out into the world just through my example. Because you are not going to change people's minds. You can start having the conversation, but some people are really uncomfortable. I mean, I've had friends who, we start talking about nutrition and they just completely check out. They're like, no, like I'm sick of it. I hate it. And then, that causes more conflict, right? Where if you just live that way, if every interaction that they have with you, you seem to be happy and you seem to have some sort of structure that's allowing you to have a positive impact on everything that you're doing, people will see that. They'll see it, and then they'll want to see what your secret sauce is, right? They'll try to figure it out. Then they'll start asking you questions. And that opens up an opportunity to have deeper conversations. And if they want to continue to have even deeper conversations, that's when, if you're aware of the resources, you can point them in the direction of further resources. And this goes for any industry that you're in. I mean, if a friend asks me, hey, how did you find out about this? Like, it seems like you're doing really well. If I'm prepared with a list of resources and I could direct them to a website where they could go to find help, or I can direct them to Over the Bridge so they can actually go talk to someone, because that's where they'll find people that are having that same experience as them, I'm doing my job as an advocate. But I'm not sitting here pulling teeth trying to convince everyone to think the way that I think, because that doesn't work.
Well, one thing I notice is, as an advocate, people don't want to hear you just talking about it all the time. But people will come to you and ask you questions if you walk the walk. There's nothing more important than living by example. So, you talk about it when you can, you bring it up, you post things, and people will know that you're interested in it. Just like anything else. If you post about shredding guitar all the time, if you find a cool video about a guitar shredder, you're probably going to post it to that buddy, who's really into guitar. So, talk about it when you can, post about it, let people know that you're interested in it, because people who are curious about it, they'll come to you when they're comfortable.
Mm.
Right? So, and, this works for me, and it may not work for everybody, but I feel comfortable putting my life out on social media. So when I do yoga, sometimes I tape myself doing yoga. So the next thing I know, I got people ask me yoga questions. I really don't know. I just follow a video, you know what I mean? But I make the time for it, and same with mental health conversation. Put yourself out there, and especially if you want to be that advocate, walk the walk, and talk is cheap. So,
For a lot of people, it's really it's embarrassing. I mean, it's like you have these like tough guys that are like, or girls who are in this world they have to be tough. And then, you're asking them to embrace this really emotional, softer side of being a human, right? That's what we're all being asked to do, especially when we're in crisis. We're being asked to actually take a step back and care about these feelings that we've been pushing to the side for so long. And it's difficult for people to do that. And it's difficult for them to actually show other people that they're doing it. But if they see you embracing those feelings, you're giving them the green light to explore it a little bit further.
Mm. One last question, I think, before we finish up, in terms of, I think we wrote off 2020 and we're not cruising into 2021 anytime soon, which is fairly disappointing for all of us. And I think, one thing that I find about a lot of people in our industry, they're very resilient and they endure a lot. And they go hard, like you said, Ace, for, months on end on tours and come home and crash. Is this a different kind of endurance for this industry now to get through this period and out the other side than our work?
So sorry, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Is it the endurance? No, it's all good. We endure a lot, and we're a resilient industry, and we work really hard. But is this cruising into 2021 after a year of what we have? Is this a different kind of endurance for people? And what would you suggest for this long haul? Trying to come out of this, because there's still no end in sight, right? So especially in certain countries that are still at full gas, full steam.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to what I said one of the original things I said, which was, create yourself a schedule, get yourself an accountability person, wake up, do some physical exercises, watch out what you eat, and things like that. I'm sure Janine could comment on that sort of stuff more than I can, but I find that's what helps, is like not to think about too much in the future about the what ifs, or the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and what may or may not happen. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a future teller. I can't tell that. But what I can tell is what I'm going to do in tomorrow morning for me. So
yeah, that's really important to focus on today, because Anna, it really is. It's the type of endurance that we're dealing with now is really long term. I mean, if you've been doing short runs, like now we're doing like a marathon, and it's important to focus on just what you have control of today. We don't have control of other people. We don't have control of what our governments do. We don't have control of the virus. All we have control is what we do every single day. So find ways to improve your skill set. Take a class. There's tons of free resources, tons of free classes. Right now, I would recommend everybody does, there's COVID certifications and things. You never know. You might need somebody, in your job where you might be the only one who has the certification, and there you go. And a lot of these things are free resources. Watch the webinars, join the groups, talk to your friends. Improve yourself as a person, because at the end of the day, we have to recognize that although we're talking about the entertainment industry as a whole, we're all individuals. And the way that a large organization thrives is by having individuals that are thriving every day in their own personal lives. So please just focus on taking care of your everyday, one day at a time.
That's amazing advice. Thank you so much. Now, I'm just going to go back to our original slides before we say goodbye. So somebody had asked for us to put up the speakeasy invite. So make sure that you take a screenshot of that. WeMakeEvents.com. The password for the schedule is rat-tat-tat-tat with a full stop in between. And also we have those resources on TheatreArtLife, so TheatreArtLife.com/evolution. Click on mental health and wellbeing tab. There's some resources there for people to go to if you need some support and some help. Please don't be hesitant to reach out. And I'd also say, been around a few people that have gained support, that if you're not finding it from one, don't give up, find it from somebody else. Explore a few resources or a few therapists or people that might help you to find your right fit. It is a right fit that you need to get when you are looking for support. And there's a free limited number of 60-minute sessions for those suffering from anxiety, stress, and anger. Anyone who's going through some negative emotions at the time, held remotely by a good friend of mine, Barbara Del Pez, who is an amazing coach, and she helps me personally on a weekly basis as a friend, and talking to her is a really wonderful experience when you're working through any kind of issues that you're going on. So please reach out for those resources if you need them. Janine, Ace, thank you so much for spending an hour with us at TheatreArtLife today. I so appreciate your insight, your knowledge, and your experience with mental health and support.
Thank you.
Yeah, and before we go, if anybody wants to reach out to Janine or I'm sure you can find us on Facebook, and I believe we both put our email addresses in the chat section on the side, so please reach out to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoot us a DM. No big deal. Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reach out.
And check out the podcasts, of course, right?
Of course,
yes,
the podcast.
the TheatreArtLife podcast and the #Thriving podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you again so much, guys, for your time. I wish you all the best in the next coming months. And and I hope you have the great rest of your holiday season.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for now. Bye, everyone.